Hello and welcome back to the Games Kingdom. My name's Carl King and today's video is about Earth. This is a new 1 to 5 player tableau building board game by Inside Up Games, designed by Maxime Tardif and presented by Conor McGoey. As I say, this is a 1 to 5 player game, but you can also play it in a 2v2 sort of team mode. But I've played through today the beginner solo mode. I unfortunately lost, but I think this is a game that is going to sort of, for want of a better phrase, grow on you, literally, the more you play it, because the cards that you play into your tableau are going to combo off each other and are going to be activated pretty much each and every turn after you play them, or the possibility is there for them to be activated each and every turn after they've been played, because not only do you get to activate on your turn, but each of your opponents and or the AI also get to activate every action that the opposition and active player plays, but only at a sort of lesser value. So basically you've got your player board and you will take an action and you will get the top action shown on that player board area, and that is obviously the sort of better half of that action, and all of your opponents or the AI, if you're playing solo, or your teammates will get to then activate the bottom half of that action, which is a sort of lesser version of the activation that you have just chosen. So there are 4 different actions that you can do. You can do planting, composting, watering, or growing. And as I say, on each of those actions, when you choose them, and you can choose the same action as you had the previous turn, or you can choose the same action that the person before you has just taken. There's no sort of restrictions. You could plant 3 times in a row if you wish, and you could plant, then your opponent plants, and you can do that planting action again. The only sort of restrictions on those actions are that you have to be able to pay any associated costs. So when you plant, you will pay soil, which is the currency in the game. But when you do that, obviously you can plant up to 2 cards if you're the main action, and then you will get, as I say, a sort of lesser version of that action if you are the other players in the game. And as I say, then you can compost, which is where you get soil, and you can also then compost cards into your compost pile. So your compost pile is basically face down cards on your player board, and for each of the cards in your compost pile at the end of the game you're going to score a point. There are hundreds of cards, as you will see, that you get with the game. They're all unique. They all have individual pictures on. They're all photographs, not artwork, and they are very, very nicely produced. And as I say, there's a lot of components in the game, and for the amount that you get in the game, as I say, the quality is outstanding and is certainly great value for money. I have seen games of this ilk where yes, you get a lot of stuff, but cards are not very nice. Some of the components are flimsy. You know, the sort of miniatures or the components themselves or the cubes aren't very well done. But in here you will see that all of those things have been done to a very high standard, and I'm sure that everybody who's receiving this game through Kickstarter and or getting it at retail will be more than impressed with the standard of everything that they get within the box. So yes, so back to the game itself. As I say, we've got the board sort of set out here, and as you can see, this is how my game sort of finished. I lost 170 points to 152, which I didn't think was too bad for my first play. I probably played too many cards of a similar ilk, trying to sort of combo off certain abilities. But that's the beauty of this game. There's all sorts of different combinations that you can sort of get throughout the game. As I say, because I'm playing this solo, I'm the only one playing into a tableau, and the AI doesn't do that. It sort of gets different things based on what you're doing. It gets those points similar to a normal sort of human player would, but they get trees built, they get sprouts, which is another form of currency that you can use, and also a victory point gathering tool. So as I say, you'll see all of this in a minute. But the game itself just literally plays out over a series of turns and keeps going until one person triggers the end game by doing their complete tableau. Then you finish the end of that turn back to the person who's triggered it, but they don't get that final turn. It stops with the person just before that. So when you've done your tableau, you don't get a final turn, but you keep getting additional lesser turns, as I explained earlier, off everybody else if you can do that. The only thing that you wouldn't be able to do is if somebody took the planting action. Because you filled up your tableau, you can't do any more planting, so that would be the only thing that you couldn't do to any extent. There are still things within the planting action stroke turn sequence that you might be able to do, and also every colour in the game also has sort of knock-on effects. So when you take an action, you can also activate any cards with that same colour when you've played your action, as can everybody else. They will also get that lesser action and also be able to activate any cards either in their tableau or on their player board. And then you will score points at the end of the game for card values that you've played onto your tableau. Some of those cards will then have additional scoring abilities, which you'll see when I do a quick flyby on the board in a bit. You'll see one card sort of has an ability where if you have a certain card type diagonally to it, it scored me extra victory points. So I managed to get that to full victory points, but still didn't get enough to unfortunately beat the AI. There's also 4 fauna cards which go out onto a separate board, and they will give you additional victory points if you meet the objective on any or all of those. As you complete those by doing certain things either on your game board or your tableau, you will then put a marker out on there, and again we'll have a look at that, but you put a marker out there to say that you've completed that particular objective, and your marker goes out onto that board. If at a later date during the game you would then go below what that is, you don't lose those victory points. It stays out there. You just claim it once you've got it. You can only claim them once, but there are 4 of those that you can do. And also the person who completes their tableau first with their 16 cards also claims an additional 7 victory points for being the first player to do that. So let's have a quick sort of flyby. So we'll take the camera off the stand and we'll go around the table. So here you can see how the AI board finished up. So you can see the trees there that have sort of with their canopies on. So as the AI gets these from certain actions that both it does and you do, the sort of trees and canopies will build up, and each of the completed rows are worth 25 points. So here you will see that the top row is complete, so that was 25 points. Then it got an additional 5, 4, and then for each of the trunks, so there's 2 here, so for each of those trunks they get a single point. As soon as it gets, if it had got another one on the top there, then it would have got some additional points again. Here you can see the sprouts. So each time it gains sprouts, which are the green cubes, then you put those on there, and each of those rows is worth 5 points. This is its compost pile, so as I say, each of these cards is worth a point. There are some points on these cards, so it gets points for all of these face-up cards, and there are 6 actions that it takes through each round, and then you do that twice, as indicated here, and that is another way that the game can end in the solo mode. If you don't complete your 16 cards before it has done 2 complete run-throughs of its deck, then it would claim the 7 victory points for the end game objective. Because it doesn't build a tableau of cards, that's the way that it would gain that. But I finished doing my cards before it had gone through all of its cards. It had 1 go left, so I managed to do that and claim the 7 extra victory points. As you can see here, it was scoring quite heavily on this board. It scored 47 points on here to my 37. Now on this side of the board, which is the sort of beginner side of this, all of those values are worth 10. So if you were playing in a 5-player game and everybody scored one of those objectives, each player would get 10 points. But we'll just quickly sort of tip these off, and we'll turn it over, and you can see here that on this board the first person to complete an objective would get 15 points, then 11, 8, 6 and 5. So on sort of later plays of the game, if you're playing this quite regularly, you would use this side of the board, and the quicker that you got to those objectives and put your marker out on there, you would score more points than your opponent. And the 2 other extra cards at the end there are ecosystem cards. So when you're playing against other players and you've played a couple of games, you can use this side of the board and there will be some extra ecosystem cards, and on this board anybody can score those as end game objectives, but you do have those on your own player boards to play during the game. So here we can see a standard player's player board. So you've got cards here, you've got the event cards, you've got your island card, which tells you your starting resources. So everybody gets dealt one of those, and they are double-sided. Each player can choose which one they want. So you'll get a certain amount of cards in your hand, you'll get a certain amount of soil to start with, and it might give you 1 or 2 other things depending on which side of the card you take. You get a climate card, you get an ecosystem card per player, and that's just your own personal objective. So that obviously will determine maybe how you play on your tableau. And here is your compost pile. So again, you will be putting face down cards into this compost pile, and again each of those composted cards are worth a victory point to you at the end of the game. And sometimes you will get ecosystem cards which will then give you extra points depending on how many are in there, which is the card that I drew out in the game. So it gave me an extra 3 victory points for every 4 cards in my composted pile. So I had 19 cards, so I got an extra 12 victory points. So here is where you put your tokens at the start of the game, and you've got 4. You get an extra one which you can use on your player board to donate when the other player takes their turn and they tell you what action they're doing. You can use that 5th one on there to just show and remind you what you're doing. At any point in the game, you can exchange 3 sprouts for 2 soil. As I say, the soil is the sort of currency in the game, so that's quite a useful thing, and you can do that at any time. Here is the solo board that you play with. It's slightly different than the sort of main player board, simply because it's got the actions at the top, and then it's got a set of similar actions at the bottom, but they are used when you're more experienced. These are very sort of more advanced versions of the ones at the top. So the ones at the top are very similar to the ones in the normal sort of standard game, and these are slightly different because they will give the AI certain additional benefits instead of the ones when you're playing on sort of a beginner mode. So here's the box of components. So as you can see, these are all very nicely done. These are the canopies for the trees. So you get 4 colours of those. You get some cardboard tokens to represent the soil. You get the player markers that you put out onto your player board, and then they go out to donate whether and when you get the objectives. And then these are the green sprout cubes here, and you get quite a lot of those, and again, very nice quality. Here's the player board that I finished with. So as you can see, I finished the tableau, and I did manage to get some canopies on trees, and you score points for these. So if you've just got canopies, you score 1 point per canopy, 1 point per trunk. If you've got the canopy, so this one here said it has a stack value of 4, so you would put 3 trunks, and then the 4th one would be the canopy, and then you would score 5 points. So if I'd have just got the 3 trunks on here, you just get the 3 points. If you manage to get the 4th, that gives you 5 points. You can spend these during the game as well, depending on certain cards that you might get in your hand stroke play into your tableau, and you would just take them off there. And obviously if you take them off, they only score these points at the end. So be aware that if you take them off and it loses you a couple of points, it's got to be worth doing that during the game. You can rebuild them once they're sort of canopy is taken off, or you might spend those 2 trunks and they might go back in the box. You can again put those 2 back onto that card at a later date. Some have only got space for 1, so you just stick a canopy straight down there. And as you can see here, some of the cards, when you play the card, and if somebody had taken the yellow action, you then can activate the cards in your tableau, and you activate from top left to right and then go across. So each time a colour is activated, as I say, you've got all those up the top there, you can see that they are then activated in that order. You will also see some multicoloured ones, so you will activate the solid ones first, going from the top row left to right, then second row left to right, and then you would go again with all of the multicoloured ones. You also get cards, as I say, at the start of the game, and these will also be coloured as well. So you can see here that this is a water action, and you can activate these in any order as long as you either do this board first and then your cards, or you do your cards and then this board. You can't do, say, a card from here, then there, then go back, or vice versa. It has to be either this or that to do that. It just stops you sort of doing too many sort of very strong combos by saying, oh, well, I'm activating a card in the top row, then I'm going here, then I'm coming back. It all has to be done in a certain order. And then, as you can see, we have some very nice and quite a lot of stacks of cards here, as well as I had 19 cards here, and the AI had 37 here at the end of the game, plus all of these. So there's sort of the best part of 300 of the Earth cards, so more than enough to keep you going during the game. If they ever run out, I would be very surprised, simply because as soon as somebody plays their 16th card in here, everybody stops pretty much within the next few turns. So, as you can see, very pretty game on the table, and as I said, it's one that I've just literally sort of finished today, playing the first game through, and as I say, did lose this, but we'll be playing again. I will keep playing on the beginner mode until I beat that, and then I'll progress. There are 4 different modes that you can do, levels I should say, that you can play. So there's a lot of replayability in here. There's 2,500 different setups that you could do based on the cards that you are dealt out at the start. And that's before you start playing any cards into your tableau. There are 2,500 plus different setup variations depending on how many players you've got and who gets what cards. So for my final conclusions, Earth, yes, it is a very pretty game, but also an excellent game. I've not played too many of these, but if you've played games like Everdell, where you're building a tableau and other things like that, Stone Age to a little bit, you're gathering cards, but I would say things like Everdell, Wingspan, if you're a fan of those types of games, I think you're going to love this. And for the cost and for what I've seen that you get in, you know, this is just all the boxes are the same. There were a few promo things that you could get if you backed it through Kickstarter, but that was, I think, just changing things like the cardboard Earth tokens for some wooden components, but the cardboard ones are more than sufficient for what you need. This is fantastic, and yeah, I think I'm going to enjoy playing this. I think my gaming friends are going to enjoy this because we've played Everdell and we love playing things like that. So without further ado, I think Earth gets the Games Kingdom Royal Seal of Approval. And until we do another one of these, folks, it's bye for now.